Our modern world is an engineering marvel. We have global communication, high-tech infrastructure, and medical miracles. Yet underneath it all, there is a growing anxiety. Supply chains are fracturing, the climate is highly volatile, and our institutions feel incredibly brittle. We tend to picture human history like this chart, an unbroken, upward trajectory from primitive beginnings to permanent prosperity. But when you look at the historical data, that line suddenly drops off. The reality is that human history is a graveyard of abandoned structures and shattered empires. Some of the most advanced societies on Earth simply hit a wall and collapsed under the weight of their own systems. The systems we build to secure our survival, specialized labor, massive infrastructure, and complex governance, eventually become the weight that pulls the structure down. To figure out if our modern world is approaching its own expiration date, we have to analyze the actual life cycle of human societies and uncover the built-in self-destruct sequence of development. Civilizational growth usually starts with geographic luck. Sociologist Jared Diamond observed that certain regions had a massive environmental head start because they had naturally occurring domesticable plants like wheat and barley, along with large farmable mammals like cattle. That geographic advantage triggered the Neolithic Revolution. When people transitioned to permanent agriculture, they started producing massive food surpluses, far more calories than they needed to survive a single day. When a small fraction of the population can feed the entire community, the rest of the people are freed from daily foraging. They can specialize. Instead of making uniform survival tools, people dedicate their lives to becoming full-time builders, legal scholars, or soldiers. Emil Durkheim called this organic solidarity. Society evolves from groups doing identical tasks into a web where individuals rely on specialized strangers. But because no one produces everything they need, society only functions if everyone does their job. If one group fails, the network stalls. While highly specialized labor drives rapid technological progress, it permanently eradicates individual self-sufficiency. This lays the very first brick of systemic fragility. As these interdependent populations swelled in size, informal family ties were no longer enough to keep everyone organized. Societies had to invent formalized institutions, things like codified laws and centralized tax structures, just to maintain order. Early writing systems like cuneiform functioned as administrative tools. They were created to track grain stores, record transactions, and enforce contracts across expanding territories. As technology advances, it shifts how a society produces goods. When these forces of production change, the social hierarchy often follows. Property laws and class dynamics evolve to favor specific groups, allowing a new elite to capture the surplus wealth the community worked to generate. Sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein mapped this dynamic on a global scale with his world systems theory. He divided the global economy into interconnected tiers, showing how wealth concentrates in a core. But the core relies on extracting resources from the periphery, regions providing cheap labor and raw materials to fuel the center's massive growth. A civilization operating at its peak is an inherently unbalanced machine. It relies on the aggressive, constant extraction of resources from the bottom to support a heavy, elite top layer. Eventually, managing that machine becomes too difficult. Anthropologist Joseph Tainter observed that older societies try to solve problems by adding layers of complexity, longer supply chains, bigger bureaucracies, and heavier infrastructure. This chart reveals the tipping point of diminishing returns. The financial and energy costs of running all those complex systems curve upward, while the actual benefit they deliver to the citizens flattens out and drops. The cost of the bureaucracy outpaces its value. When a civilization hits this deficit, it becomes incredibly fragile. Because every ounce of energy is spent simply maintaining the status quo, minor shocks, like a localized crop failure or a small border skirmish, can bring down the entire state. To pay for these massive costs, societies push their environments past their natural carrying capacity. Ancient Mesopotamian cities, for example, over-irrigated their fields to maximize crop yields, making the soil so salty nothing could grow, triggering starvation. Confronted with these resource crises, the ruling classes face a choice. Historian Arnold Toynbee noted that instead of creatively adapting and reforming the system, wealthy elites almost always resort to coercive power to forcibly maintain their privileges. Societal collapse occurs when a society is too brittle to reform its institutions, leaving an elite class to consume the remaining resources to maintain a system that no longer yields a return for its citizens. Look at the modern era. We are watching our own deeply interconnected networks strain under identical pressures. The global supply chains that keep our shelves stocked and our power grids running are highly vulnerable to localized shocks. We are currently navigating severe ecological overshoot, increasingly dense layers of administrative complexity, and a concentration of wealth that mirrors the stratification seen in the final stages of many historical empires. Studying these patterns allows us to identify our own systemic flaws before the structural damage becomes permanent. It provides a way to look past the top-line numbers and see the actual health of the machine. Because societal failure is a structural design flaw, it can be mitigated. A society can survive if it actively prioritizes structural reform and resource management over protecting its rigid, outdated institutions. Recognizing this feedback loop provides the opportunity to act. By choosing reform over the preservation of a bloated status quo, we have the chance to break the historical cycle rather than following its momentum toward collapse.